ASMR dash creepypasta readings. Uh, Creepypasta presents. I'm an academic, postdoctoral researcher, and I have some stories the public should know. I need to get some weight off my chest. And honestly, I don't know where else it would be appropriate or believed than here. I'm probably telling you all this out of spirit. Hold on, I think the music's just really jamming right now. It's hard for me to tell exactly how equal or not equal it is, but I think that's better. I need to get some weight off my chest, and honestly, I don't know where else it would be appropriate or believed than here. I'm probably telling all of this out of spite due to funding cuts, but that doesn't change the fact that the public shouldn't be left in the dark anymore. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in STEM biology, specifically. I don't want to give too many details since I actually want to make it through telling you these experiences before someone decides I'm a little too persuasive and gets rid of me. Sorry to say I can't tell you which school I did my PhD, but I can tell you that it was in the United States, that I'm an American, and that it was one of those fucked up graduate only institutions, medical and PhDs mostly. The idea of doing fantastic science and maybe getting a Nobel was too much to pass up. I mean, I couldn't let that excitement, that excellent speech I came up with in the shower go to waste, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, science is great and all, if it was just science. But academia and basic research aren't really all that empirical. You remember alchemy? It was like half magic and half chemistry. That's what it was like. There's a lot of supernatural fucked up shit that happens in the science buildings and in institutions, even more so if it's one of those graduate only ones. The supernatural is surprisingly drawn to the world of objective truth and observations. I don't know if that's because they just like fucking with us and showing us how much we don't know, that our big brain means nothing, or if that's a way for them to understand us and themselves. As such, most successful scientists thought history have been those who trapped it in the supernatural to bolster their own knowledge or success. And I mean most. Galileo, George, Mendel, Isaac Newton, even Feynman dabbed in more than hallucinogens. I think the scientific society of the flayed god is pretty pissed that he blew them off after the stunt they pulled to recruit him. I'll get to them a little later, but they're a sect on every academic campus. You may have been wondering how you've never heard of these events, and that's probably for good reason. Science communities and professors have a secondary role besides educating the public. They make sure to disavow or make anyone who exposes this shit seem uncredible at best. At worst, they just make you disappear. Poof. Never seen again. Sometimes, that stage your death if you're lucky. I say lucky because they're usually tamer than what they could do, and at least your family will get some closure. I guess I should start off with a couple of stories from when I was in graduate school. The first encounter I had as a PhD student was in fucking big words. Was with Maronetta. Scientists aren't strangers to working late. Graduate students and postdoctoral fellows, especially. A lot of those great papers usually come from at least one sleepless night or two while professors and lab hands usually rush out at 5 p.m. Some of you might admire that type of passion, but I can tell you that passion has nothing to do with it. It's fear. It's circumstance. It's being trapped in your goddamn lab till 3 a.m. Sorry. Let me bring it back. After choosing the after choosing a disreputable lab, I was learning a lot of mythologies and was a bit too enthusiastic about troubleshooting. The sun had gone down hours ago, and I pulled off a latex glove to... I hope you're not all forced to hear that in the background. I pulled off a latex glove to check the time on my phone. 11 p.m. I decided that was enough for the day and packed up my things to head to the first floor. Our lab began on the second. Now, some of these buildings are beautiful during the day, but absolutely terrifying at night. Everything echoes, the hair on your neck is always standing at end, and there's a feeling that you're being watched that makes you look around constantly. I wasn't a fan of any of it, so I rushed down the steps, my eyes glued to my phone as I approached the glass door before something made me look up as my hand reached the bar handle. A few feet from the door, staring right at me, was a ridiculously tall, thin woman in a dirty white gown. Her hair was disheveled and fell around a disturbingly large grin. Her pale arms were grossly long. I mean, her wingspan could have blocked the entire entrance to the outside and then some. She held her hands up, playfully wiggling her fingers, and from under her gown slid a puppet. It looked incredibly lifelike as it bowed and did an unsettling jiggle. Something just wasn't right as its head spun as it danced. I was completely transfixed when it took a bow and gestured for me to join in. I was able to snap myself out of it and backed away. I hurled back upstairs to the second floor, where I hoped I could hurry to another side exit a little down the hall.
Luke?
Yeah?
Stay up there?
I wasn't a fan of any of it, so I rushed down the steps, my eyes glued to my phone as I approached the glass door before something made me look up as my hand reached the bar handle. A few feet from the door, staring right at me, was a ridiculously tall, thin woman in a dirty white gown. Her hair was disheveled and fell around a disturbingly large grin. Her pale arms were grossly long. I mean, her wingspan could have blocked the entire entrance to the outside, and then some. She held her hands up, playfully wiggling her fingers, and from under her gown slid a puppet. It looked incredibly lifelike as it blowed, and did a unsettling jiggle. Bowed. Fuck, I messed that one up twice. As it bowed and did an unsettling jiggle. Something just wasn't right. Its head spun as it danced. It was completely transfixed when it took a bow and gestured for me to join in. I was able to snap myself out of it, and I backed away. I hurried back upstairs to the second floor where I hoped I could hurry. Fuck. I hurried back upstairs to the second floor where I hoped I could hurry to another side exit a little down the hall. I couldn't get to my car easily from there, but screw it, I thought. If I ran fast enough, I could make a break for the hospital down the street, catch a ride share home. I descended another set of stairs, and as I got to the door, there she was again, this time sitting on her hunches behind her puppet. Its hands on its hips, leaned to one side quizzically. She nodded to me to come outside. Once again, I sprinted upstairs, this time heading for the main entrance. I opted for the stairs instead of the elevator and burst into the lobby, which was surrounded by glass walls that faced the vehicle entrance. I took a walk around the inside of the lobby, trying to peek around the concrete pillars. Fuck. I took a walk around the inside of the lobby, trying to peek around the concrete pillars. Out front, when I heard a soft tap, 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 coming from the glass panel a few feet from me. There it was again, right up against the glass. Once again, I sprint upstairs, and no, Darwin, go lay down. Go lay down. Go. You're a good boy, yes you are. Now go lay down. You're just a little bit of an idiot. Lay down. No, lay down. Lay down. Silly dogs. No. You're becoming senile in your old age. There, does that make you happy? Alright. I decided on another set of the stairs, and as I got to the door, there she was again, this time sitting on her hunches behind her puppet, its hand on its hips, leaned on the side quizzically. She nodded to me to come outside. Once again, I sprinted upstairs, and this time headed for the main entrance. Oh, wait, we already read this part. Tap, 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 coming from the glass panel a few feet from me. There it was again, right up against the glass. But now I could see it fully. It wasn't a puppet. It was the corpse of a young woman, her torn face pinned back into the grotesque smile, her eyes reflecting the agony of her last moments. The woman was peeking from behind the concrete pillars. Even from inside, I could hear her raspy, childlike voice. Play. I hadn't planned on staying the night, but I also wasn't stupid enough to think that I could outrun whatever the hell she was. I'm still convinced there aren't multiple of her. Some experiment gone wrong, or a gaggle of entities drawn to places of research. I acquitted and headed upstairs towards the break room. It at least had a couple of couches for me to sleep on and a couple of vending machines so I wouldn't go hungry. A postdoc who I had seen several times during the day was cleaning out a bowl at the sink. "You're staying late too, huh?" He looked over as he grabbed some paper towels. I nodded and fell onto the couch behind him. He took another glance at me before speaking again. "At least you're smart enough to try and not push past her. Don't worry, she's gone by 3 a.m. on the dot. Every time." He opened a cabinet and tossed me one of his ramen packages. Just try to plan out your experiments around her next time, or make sure you bring something to make yourself comfortable. Sometimes it's just unavoidable. We spent the night talking and became fast friends. Still talk to him today. I learned that everyone called her Marionetta for obvious reasons. From what I've gathered from her conferences, that thing has been sitting at every research building around the globe. Some call her a witch. Others are convinced she's someone called Baba Yaga. Others think she's responsible for the spirits of those clinical trials gone wrong. When I describe her and her puppet, my advisor, he clicked around on his computer and made a phone call to an administration. The puppet's description matched a student that had been missing for 3 days, all the way from Florida. Can you believe that? Much to my previous and current boss's chagrin, I make sure I am nowhere near a research building late at night. My work-life balance is much too important. Number 2. The next one is the saddest and most gruesome of them all. A couple of times a year, we would invite elementary school kids up with their teachers and their chaperones to tour the campus. And we took a look at the labs to inspire them to become scientists. One day, I know absolutely fucked. But scientific discoveries must go on, I suppose. Those are unlikely kids from unprivileged schools for kids with hearing disabilities, blindness, etc. Extra precautions under the guise of lab safety were taken. A handful of select labs were picked, and the school would map the route the kids would take off and placed totems at intervals to ward off any unsupernatural events. As long as they followed the route, there was usually no problem. If you've been to one of those yourself, you may have noticed different knickknacks on people's desks, on office doors, or above building entrances, explained away as quirks students and professors used to make other space more fun. First, hearing the word fun for most professors would make you immediately First, hearing the word fun from most professors would make you immediately suspicious. I've been to enough get-togethers and parties that were just excuses to ask you about your work, to know that no one knows what the word means. Secondly, they always make graduate students, some of them too new to really know the ins and outs of this visit, do these tours, and it makes absolutely no sense to me. In my second year, I had promised one of the senior grade students, Melissa, I would help her and learn the ropes. Help out and learn the ropes. We had divided the kids and their chaperones into small groups of about 6 per grade. Students to begin taking them through the labs. Now I don't know if enough people didn't volunteer or if professors completely dropped the ball, but one of the tours was left to the student in the same court as me named Jordan. We didn't know much because apparently this was idiot proof, and we were all smart people with enough common sense. Our group was one of the first to head... this was idiot proof, and we all were smart people with enough common sense. Our group was the first to head out, while the rest stayed behind and talked with the small kids in one of our large lecture halls. Over catered sandwiches. Jordan was one of those groups who stayed behind, so we told him we'd see him in a bit and headed out. Our kids had a great time. Their eyes grew wide at all the bright fluorescent images under microscopes. They gasped and squealed at the preserved organ and the mice in a jar, and spaced out completely. While one of the professors went into too much detail for a long walk about his work, we got back to the lecture hall and the kids ran to see their families from their groups and regale others who were about to set with tales of what they saw, and I noticed Jordan sitting in the front on his phone, stuffing his mouth with food. Concerned, Melissa headed over to grab his attention. "Hey, Jordan, shouldn't you still be taking your group through the tour?" "Oh, they sent another guide as we got outside, so we took them," he said with his hand over his mouth. "Seemed like a nice guy. Got sent over at last minute, I guess." What? No one was sent at last minute. Every guide that's supposed to be here is here. Even so, he'd have a badge. Did you see a badge? Melissa exclaimed. No, but he had his lab coat on and an adult cetraphone. He was still with the kids, so I'm sure they're fine. Jordan! Melissa tensed. There was no one else on that list or replacements. Of that I'm sure. They don't do last-minute jobs. Just please, tell us what he looked like and where they started. Did they head towards the first lab? Jordan sat and thought for a moment before saying he couldn't remember the man's face. He remembered looking at him directly the whole time they spoke, and yet, so soon as he turned around, poof, a blank slate. What he did remember was he had a weird gait. He walked with a familiar swivel, with extremely bow-legged. His arms flayed out a bit as he walked, never completely at one side. While standing still, he would rotate his wrists in opposite directions, every so often in an audible soft crack. When he handed the tour group over to him, he said he headed towards a new research building they were constructing across the street. They only had finished the first floor with benches so far, but he thought the man wanted to show him where the old labs would be moving to. As the man turned and led them across the grass, he heard him whistle an odd tune before saying, "You have to reckon with the past before you build a future." Honestly, it's pretty inspiring that he pushed through his disabilities to make it this far. We need more like him. Jordan took a bit of a pickle on his plate. The look on Marissa's face grew fearful, and we left to alert the faculty. They told us it would be best if the schools sorted this out themselves, so we all broke off into a full campus search. Melissa, Jordan, and I headed towards the new construction to make sure that they hadn't gotten lost on the way. Secretly hoping they were being held hostage by an over-enthusiastic street performer. The building looked completely undisturbed, halls and the doors still locked. But after a quick walk around, Jordan said he could see movement through one of the windows. We alerted the campus police, and after they came to have a look inside, they hadn't been inside more than 5 minutes before one of the officers rushed out and vomited onto the sidewalk. The other officer was close behind him, his face filled with terror and disgust. I have yet to see anyone on anyone else. They asked us to get back while they called for backup, and soon officers were swarming the entire area, but said they found no traces of man. Forensics teams came shortly after, while they stuck around. Their entrance was followed by an exclamation of horror. They came slowly with several 50 milliliters and a 2-eye flask filled to the brim with viscera. The smell was horrid, even outside. Marissa immediately began sobbing. I was too focused on keeping my own food down, and Jordan was rigid as a statue. Apparently what Jordan saw moving on those was one of those old rotate water baths and to grow bacteria cultures, except it was filled with a fucking slurry of human parts. They did DNA tests, and it matched the students and the chaperones that went missing, since they couldn't find a trace of the guy Jordan saw, and Jordan himself was in lecture hall. The whole time after he left. They had no suspects. There was a manhunt that lasted all of 1 month before they gave up completely. The school was sued, and from what I heard, they settled out of court with the families. A few of the parents got together for a candlelight vigil. I heard the parents of the chaperone was too distraught and never came, only to later find out one of their kids was in the group as well. A couple of days before the vigil, they had climbed into a bath with a bottle of sleeping pills and vodka. It's just because they couldn't take it anymore. Jordan dropped out a few weeks later. He decided to go into the hospital. I hear he's a hotel manager now. Melissa finished about 2 years later, but left academia completely. Never give a tour again in that time, and could only glare at Jordan without ever speaking a word to him. I took over for her, feeling it was my duty to make sure that this never happened again. The building went unfinished, and they still hadn't decided what to do with it. Newer students and visitors say they've seen a bewildered man with a strange gait at random places on campus, trying to lead them towards a construction site. Sorry. I need a break. I'll post this after I get some sleep, and we'll make sure to come back later to share more of what we've been through if you're interested. For now, I've lost track of time. It's about 10:35 p.m., and I would very much like to sleep in my own bed tonight. Credit, Solomon Sage. Thank you all for watching or joining. I sadly have to go. I hope you all enjoy. I'm going to cut this down in just a little bit and cut out all my fails, and not all my fails. I'm going to cut out all the big dead sections, and then I'll probably cut out the fails at a later date if I have time. Thank you all for watching or listening, and I hope you all sleep well if you're watching this before you go to bed.